A pastor and theologian from Pennsylvania flew to Hawaii for a speaking engagement. He woke up early because of the time difference and found a diner nearby that was still open at 3 a.m. This isn't the kind of place he would normally eat at, he said, but he didn't want to touch the menu because of how dirty it looked, but he didn't have any other options at that time. And so while he was drinking his coffee, a group of loud and boisterous prostitutes came into the diner and sat on either side of him. One of the prostitutes, whose name was Agnes, casually mentioned that her 39th birthday was the next day. Her friend rudely responded, "So what do you want from me, a birthday party?" Agnes replied, "No, I don't really expect a birthday party. I was just telling you, I guess. I never really had a birthday party in my whole life." And the pastor was so moved when he heard this that he spoke to the diner owner, Harry, and asked if these women came into the diner every day around this time. And he said yes, that they did. And so the pastor and Harry made a plan. With Harry's help, they decided they were going to throw a birthday party for Agnes the next night. The first birthday party she'd ever had. Word got around the streets, and by 3:15 a.m., the diner was filled with prostitutes eager to celebrate Agnes's birthday with her, wall-to-wall prostitutes and a pastor. When Agnes entered the surprise party, she was overwhelmed. Tears streamed down her face, so many that the diner owner had to blow out the candles on the cake for her. Then Harry told her to cut the cake, but Agnes shyly asked, "Look, Harry, is it all right with you if is it okay if I what if I just took the cake home to keep it for a little while? Because I don't want to cut it yet. Is that all right if I don't eat it right away?" Harry shrugged and answered, "Sure, it's okay if you want to keep the cake. Take it home if you want." "Can I?" she asked. Then looking at the pastor, she said, "I live just down the street a couple doors. I just want to take the cake home quick and I'll be right back, I promise." As Agnes left the diner, the pastor suggested that they pray for her. And after praying for Agnes, Harry leaned over the counter and accusingly said, "Hey, you never told me you were a preacher. What kind of church do you belong to?" And the pastor shared this about that moment. He said, "In one of those moments, just the right words came to me, and I answered, I belong to a church that throws birthday parties for prostitutes at 3:30 in the morning." Harry waited a moment and then skeptically answered, "No, you don't. There's no church like that. If there was, I'd join it. I'd join a church like that." I wonder what kind of church would look like that. What would church look like if we did church like that? I wonder what would happen if we, as followers of Jesus, followed his example of meeting others in their messiness for the sake of loving and rescuing them. I'm so excited for today's show because we're going to be learning how to meet others in their messiness with the love of Jesus. You're watching One Day Closer, where we're learning together how to use our one day closer to eternity to bring the hope and purpose of Jesus to those around us. Let's go meet our guest for today. We're here today with Nate Moyer, the teaching pastor at our City Center Church in Bethlehem. Nate, man, it's so awesome to have you on the show. Just our friendship and relationship over the past couple of years, and then talking about this awesome topic that I know is just I've seen in your heart and life and through what you're doing in your church. So thanks so much for being here.
Definitely. Major privilege. Appreciate it.
It's awesome, man. So let's just start, let our viewers get to know you a little bit. So tell me about yourself and your family a little bit.
So born and raised here most of my life in southeastern PA. Married, me and my wife Val are about to celebrate 12 years in August.
Awesome.
And we're what we call beautifully blended family. So we have 4 kids together, and believe it or not, we're going on our 6th grandkid.
Wow.
Due in August.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Not too many people. A lot of people have to fact check me on that one.
Yeah, wait a minute. How old are you? Oh, man, that's awesome. And tell me about your role at our City Center.
So my wife and I joined the City Center team in late 2020. And our lead pastor is actually out in Berkeley, California. So we are a West Coast to East Coast church.
Yeah.
And we were approached with the opportunity to plant an East Coast location of the church here in Bethlehem. And we launched in the fall of 2023.
Okay.
And just recently we've restructured our leadership a little bit. So my role is actually fairly new. I'm transitioning into a new role of teaching pastor. So no longer the campus pastor, I guess you could say. but I'm going to be really focused on teaching, preaching Sunday mornings, and developing discipleship pathways and stuff like that.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You'll be great at it.
I'm excited.
And so we're going to be talking about the topic of meeting people in their messiness, their brokenness. And I think it's such a powerful thing that God's doing through you and others' lives because he met you there first. So tell me a little bit about how God's done that for you.
Yeah. So for my wife and I, we both lost one of our parents at a young age. She lost her mom when she was 13. Wow. I lost my dad when I was 8. And like I mentioned before, we're a blended family. So for my wife and I, it's both our second marriage.
Yes.
Her previous husband passed away of cancer. And my first marriage ended in divorce. And I think there's something about going through brokenness yourself that gives you a level of empathy for others. And that's really where my heart is. Because when you hear about somebody going through a divorce or losing a loved one, there's just a connection immediately.
Yeah, it's different, right? When we've experienced that God meeting us in that brokenness and that comfort, that encouragement, that healing he provides, and then we can taste it differently. You know, just after my brother was diagnosed with cancer, it was different when I talked to someone else who was going through the same thing, right? Wow. Yeah. And what when we talked before the show, I love what you said. You used the quote, "Never trust a leader with a limp." tell me a little bit about that. Without a limp. Never trust a leader without a limp. Tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I wanted to give credit. I looked at it was from John Wimber.
Okay.
And I love that because I think when we're talking about brokenness and messiness and ministering to people that are broken and messy, I think we have to remember we're all broken. We're all messy. And if I, as a leader, if I don't allow my scars and my brokenness to be visible for people, how are they going to see the strength of Jesus flow through me? So I think it's really important. And I think whether you're a pastor or a ministry leader, and I don't care if you have a church in the inner city, the suburbs, rural America, you're dealing with broken people. Yeah. You really are. And I think at the end of the day, some of us have more money and resources to cover it up better. Yeah. But we're all broken. We're all broken. We all have our stuff. And I think there's really a lot of power in being open and honest and transparent about it and letting people see your limps. Yeah. It's hard. And in our culture, it can be so easy, like you said, to cover it up or to pretend. And then it's amazing how many people don't share their brokenness or don't realize, like, hey, Nate struggles with the same thing I have. Brendan struggles with the same stuff, you know? But we don't share that. We hide it and create this culture that is not offering the hope of Christ. And I think it creates the facade like we have it all together. Well, we don't. Like, we clearly don't. So I've heard someone say, people resonate much more with your weaknesses than they do your perfection. It's one of my favorites. It's so good, isn't it? I love that one. That's awesome. Well, good. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll come back and dive more into this. Sounds great. Stay tuned. We'll be right back to dive more into what it looks like for Jesus and us to meet others in their messiness.
You're watching Lighthouse TV, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This station will feature uplifting faith and family programming.
Programs focusing on defending your faith, defending your freedom, and living as a believer in today's culture.
To find out more about this station and to watch original content, go to lighthousetv.org. Lighthouse TV, positively different television.
Welcome back to One Day Closer. We're here with Nate Moyer talking about how to meet others in their brokenness. So Nate, we were just hearing some of your story. Thanks for inviting us into that and how Christ met you in your brokenness in your life, and then how that's now fueling. We're going to get into how that's now fueling your heart to reach out to others. Where do you see? What are some passages in Scripture that stick out to you in this area?
Yeah, one of my favorites is in Lamentations 3. And there's a really famous hymn that comes from that, Great is Thy Faithfulness.
Yeah.
But if you look at the verses before that, like Lamentations, if you read that book without a lot of context, it can kind of be a little depressing because it is a lament.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah is writing this book after the downfall of Jerusalem and the Jewish people going into exile and all this. And the verses right before that passage that's really famous, he says, I will never forget this grief as I mourn over my loss or as I grieve. I'll never forget this pain. But then he goes on, he says that very clearly, but then he says, yet I still dare to hope. And those few words are so powerful to me because it tells me that I don't have to deny the reality of my feelings and my emotions and what I'm going through. But when I can have a firm grip on that, but when I switch my perspective to who God is, it allows me to still hope in the midst of pain, in the midst of suffering and questions. That's such a powerful one to me. And then also I think of, when it comes to the church context and in ministry, I think of Matthew 9, where Jesus sees the crowds and he has compassion.
Yeah.
And he looks, he says, they're helpless, they're lost, they're confused, like sheep without a shepherd. And I think that has to be our response when we see people. I was in youth ministry for close to 20 years, and I look at our young people today, and that's what they are. They're lost, they're confused, they're helpless, they're just wandering around without purpose, without any kind of idea of their identity and who they are. And we have to start with compassion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it's so easy for us to sit on a hill and point out people's flaws and say, oh, if you would stop doing that, you'd be better. Rather than just having compassion and saying, you know what, and a curiosity too. Let me hear your story. Let me hear what you're going through. So those two passages really stick out, and I think there's some really valuable insight and power in those.
Yeah, I love that. And Matthew 9 is one of my favorite passages. And just the Greek word splagnigzomai for compassion, but it's a compassion that leads to action. It's like you're moved in your gut over what you see, and out of love you pursue that. And I think, like you said, it's so different than just making judgments. But when we see it, we're like, man, I want to bring Christ into that space. I want to enter that. Wow. What are some ways that you've had a great opportunity to shape your church culture to embody this? And so what are some ways that you've been doing that?
So one of the things that we not only try to talk about, but actually live it out, is this idea of belong before you believe. And it's funny because recently I've seen a lot of discussion online about this, and people kind of going down some theological rabbit holes with it. And what we don't mean is that you can belong to the kingdom of heaven without believing. Obviously, Romans 10 tells us that you have to confess with your mouth, believe in your heart, and you will be saved.
Right.
So there is a level of belief. But what we are saying is that you can have a seat at our table without believing everything that we believe or agreeing with everything that we say. And I think there's something so powerful in that, because when people are welcomed, truly welcomed into a community, into a relationship, not being forced to change or forced to talk a certain way, that's where life transformation happens. That's where life change happens. It happens in relationship. But if we don't even let them get past the front door, how is that relationship going to happen? So we really try to communicate that, along with, it's kind of, I think, a newer version of the phrase, come as you are. You know what I mean? And I think that's a great, catchy phrase to invite people to church. But when they actually take us up on that offer, we have to be okay with it. When someone comes in and they don't look like you, talk like you, act like you have to be okay with that, because you said, come as you are. And that's what we're really trying to emulate, and just walk it out and do it in a way that allows people to take their next step, because it's not just belong before you believe. The next step is to believe in Jesus. Because we believe that Jesus is the best and only way. And we want you to believe in him, but we're not going to force it on you. And we want God to work in you.
Right?
Exactly.
And I love that, even more than come as you are, that belong, that component, right? And that's my story. So the biggest impact that someone had on me when God was working in my life to bring me to himself was, I came to visit my brother here in Pennsylvania. I was living in Wisconsin. They had an awesome young adult community called Insight. And I went, I'd never been to something like this before, and I met a guy named Ray Rivera, And I can still picture it. I walked up the stairs, and my brother's like, "Hey, this is my brother." And Ray's like, "You're Brady's brother." And I think he picked me up, and he grabbed me, and I was like, "Wow, this is different." You know, like, and then I saw their community interacting, and I went home, and I was like, I want that. I don't know what that is. It's John 17, right? There's something about the testimony of our unity and people experiencing that fellowship that points to the fact that Jesus truly is the Son of God.
Yeah.
Man. Wow.
Yeah, because people are looking for community.
Yeah.
They're looking for a place to belong.
Yeah.
In a world that is so divisive.
Yes.
The only hope for a divided world is a united church.
Yeah.
And a welcoming church. And letting people come in and really experience God's goodness for themselves. And one of the ways we try to do that too is just being authentic.
Yeah.
And being real. I know that's kind of like a staple everywhere. Everyone says they want to be authentic, but it's like, are we really being authentic? And is it something where, I want to be authentic from the platform to the pew, even though we don't have pews, we have chairs. We're in a school, but if you came to our church on a Sunday morning, you would hear me teaching and preaching very similar to this. We try to create conversational type gatherings that are very just I would say, intimidating for people. They can come and sit down. They're not getting preached at. Yeah. And I'm not saying there's not a place for that, but in our context, we think there's just a lot of room for people to come in and experience a conversation type gathering. Yeah. And people are going to podcasts and all these other formats. Yes. So we're trying to go something like that. And I'm going to talk normal. I'm going to talk like I do when we're having a cup of coffee together or having a conversation like this. And we also want it to be authentic in our pre-service engagement and post-service engagement with people talking and, our greeters at the front door. I tell our greeters, I say, listen, if you're not in the mood to smile this morning, don't be at the front door. But at the same time, I was wrestling with this recently, and I didn't know how to put language to it. And I came across this term called toxic positivity. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but for me, it really brought clarity to this thing where sometimes when someone is coming to church broken, they just got divorced, they just lost their job, they just lost a loved one, and they're coming to church, they're walking through the doors, and they see somebody doing backflips and jumping off the walls, and it can sometimes actually do the opposite of what we want to. We want to welcome them, but it actually can make them feel worse. Yeah. Because they just had a horrible week, and now they come in and they're like, oh man, these people nothing's wrong. They're just. So it's like I tell our greeters and everybody, like, I want you to be authentic and genuine. I want you to be genuinely friendly, genuinely excited to see people, but also be sensitive. Have a sense of self-awareness to know, like, that person looks like they're hurting. You know what I mean? So maybe I'm not going to tackle them with a bear hug, but I'm going to greet them and say, you know what? It's really good to see you. You know what I mean? And I think there's just a discernment that comes with that people will notice. And
like you talked about earlier, it's having the eyes of Christ. Yeah. To see that compassion, to recognize, this person isn't ready for a high five, but they need a hug.
Yes,
or like
100%.
Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Wow. And then I love what you talked about, just creating space for the Spirit to work. Yeah. Tell me about that.
So a lot of times I grew up in church. I've been in church my whole life, went to a Christian school. I was in church 6 days a week. So a lot of times when we hear that term space for the Spirit, we think about Sunday mornings. Yeah. And we think about, all right, we're going to give a 20-minute block here for spontaneous worship. We're going to let God move and do his thing. And we're going to create a space for an altar call or words of, prophetic words or all those things are great. But when I say space for the Spirit, I'm actually talking more about my Monday through Saturday kind of relationships. Yeah. Where I'm allowing space for the Spirit to work in the people that I'm in relationship with, rather than trying to give them a prescription to fix whatever it is that's going on. Yeah. Because I think there's so many times where we're quick to try to give answers and fixes to everything when really, God is saying, listen, this is my job. This is my place. You know what I mean? We're called to be like Jesus, not the Holy Spirit. Let the Holy Spirit convict and comfort and draw close, and let's love people. Let's create an atmosphere where they see that flowing through us naturally, where we're not trying to just treat them like a project, but we're actually treating them like an image bearer, someone who's creating the image of God with value, worth, dignity, and the roles could very easily be reversed. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah,
I love that, and it just I've heard someone talk about John 1, Christ comes, he's a truth and grace in flesh.
Yep.
And so often we walk around like truth bombs. We're just blowing people up, right? We're all about, well, this is the truth, this is what you need to hear, when they need the truth wrapped in grace and flesh, and that looks totally different, right?
There's a book written by Preston Perry on apologetics and evangelism, and he said, if I give you the truth on a garbage can lid, right? And you reject it. You didn't reject the truth. You rejected the way I gave it to you. And that is so true. We walk around with like truth bombs. I like how you said that. That's a great way. It's got to be grace and truth.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
Matching it. And what are some ways that you've learned that we can enter well and wisely into people's messiness and brokenness that give space for them to come as they are, for the Spirit to move?
I would say, I think we have to be... if someone invites me into their brokenness, I count it a privilege.
Yeah.
I really do. It is something that I try to approach with humility and gratitude, knowing that this isn't something I'm owed or deserved. And when someone invites you into that, it's a sacred space.
Yeah.
There was a guy at our church a couple years ago was in a really, really bad motorcycle accident, had a 6% chance of living. And this past Mother's Day, we just celebrated his 2-year anniversary with getting through, not just getting through it, but just blowing expectations out the window.
Awesome.
And they invited my wife and I into that journey with them. And I remember getting the phone call after it happened, and I was like, number one, I felt so unqualified for it.
Yeah.
But I felt like a gratitude and a sense of humility and privilege, like, wow, they trusted me with this? So it's like sometimes we have a sense of entitlement, like I just want to step into it rather than waiting for the invite. And knowing that, wow, this person trusted me with this sacred space of what they're going through. And I'm going to enter it with that gratitude and humility and just be there. Sometimes your presence is better than your words. Knowing that the Holy Spirit is in you, working through you, and He will give you the right words to say.
Yeah.
But if it's awkwardly silent, let it be awkwardly silent. I have put my foot in my mouth so many times before.
Oh man, I have too.
Yeah.
But it's like, gosh, this is the fact that you're there, your presence, and with the attitude that you're talking about, Nate, it's like people are going to see that, right?
Yeah.
Like to view it that way. This isn't a burden. This isn't a right that I have. This is a privilege. That I've been given space to be with them in this. Man, that's really powerful. Yeah. Wow.
Really good.
And the humility, What would you say to someone who's in the middle of their messiness, their brokenness, in the middle of a storm right now, and they're just trying to figure out what to do?
Well, I would probably go back to Lamentations 3 and encourage them to still dare to hope. Don't be afraid. I think as Christians, sometimes we will... I was talking earlier about having that firm grip on reality and your feelings and emotions, and then at the same time having a firm grip on Jesus.
Yeah.
Sometimes we fall into one or the other, and I think it's okay to have both, because that's what we see with Jeremiah. He didn't deny his feelings and emotions, but he also did not let go of Jesus and his hope. So I would encourage him, dare to hope.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, wow, this is really tough. Yeah. This is really hard. I don't know if this season's ever going to end for me, but I know my God is with me through it. And then I also think of Ephesians 3:20.
Yeah.
That verse really impacted my wife and I during 2020. That was a big year for a lot of people, obviously. Yeah. I got laid off from my job that I had been at for close to 20 years. My wife and I were transitioning out of our previous church that I had been at for close to 20 years.
Wow.
So there was a lot of change happening. But Ephesians 3:20, Paul is praying for the church, and he says, to the God that he says he can do exceedingly and abundantly more than you ask, think, or imagine.
I love it.
What I learned is that in order for God to exceed your expectations, he's going to disappoint you first. Think about it. Right. It means he's not going to do what you think he's going to do. Yeah. And for me, that was life-changing. Because I said, wow, because I always pictured things happening a certain way. And when they didn't, I got discouraged. Now I try to look at it like, all right, God, what do you have next for me? That's better.
I love that, man. That's so good. And we've got just a little bit of time left. What do you say to someone who's afraid? They're in the brokenness and messiness. They're afraid to share it with someone else. What do you...
I would definitely pray to God for wisdom and discernment, but look for somebody with a limp.
There you go.
Look for somebody with scars that has been through what you've gone through, but they've come out on the other side. and they've had that victory. They've seen the goodness of God on the other side of it, not just in the midst of it. Because what that will do is there will be a level of trust and empathy there right away. That person is going to receive you, hopefully, knowing they've been in your shoes, they know how to relate to it, and it'll allow you to trust them because they've been there. It's hard to trust people and open up to people that haven't been where you're at.
That's true.
So for me, that's some practical advice that I think will go a long way.
I love that. Man, thanks so much, brother.
Yeah, definitely.
It's been so great having you on the show.
Love it.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back to talk about how we can begin applying these truths to our own lives.
You're watching Lighthouse TV, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This station will feature uplifting faith and family programming.
Programs focusing on defending your faith, defending your freedom, and living as a believer in today's culture.
To find out more about this station and to watch original content, go to lighthousetv.org. Lighthouse TV, positively different television.
In Luke 7:34, Jesus was criticized for associating with tax collectors and sinners. He was called a glutton and a drunkard because he was so committed to identifying with sinners right in the middle of their brokenness and messiness. And we're called to do the same. Here are some steps that you can begin taking today to start living like Jesus and meeting others in their messiness. First, be present with compassion. Just as Jesus sat with those in need, we're called to be present in people's brokenness and messiness, showing them that they matter and they're valued. Second, create safe spaces. Create environments where people feel welcomed and embraced, even with all the baggage that they're bringing with them. And third, pray and trust God's timing. Entering someone's brokenness is a sacred act. Pray that God opens doors and gives you wisdom in how to offer love, patience, and encouragement, and trust that God is the one who ultimately heals, and allow Him to work through you as you walk alongside others. And finally, love others enough to walk with them to a better place. Don't spend your time trying to call others out, but invest time calling them up to the better place that God has for them in love. Do this patiently, gently, prayerfully, and after you've taken a good enough time to develop a meaningful relationship with them. Jesus didn't come for the perfect, He came for the broken, and He calls us to do the same. Thank you so much for watching One Day Closer, where we're learning together how to use our one day closer to eternity to bring Jesus' hope and purpose to many.